Welcome back. You're watching KTN News, this special forum by Her Standards, the Standard Group Women Network. And we are welcoming our guest, Mr. Masheti Masinjila, who is a collaborative center for gender and development. Masheti is a social policy researcher with bias towards gender responsive analysis. He has experience as a member of academic faculty at university in Kenya, as well as visiting lecturer at Dartmouth College in the US. He has worked as a program specialist in Africa and Southeast Asia regions. He's currently the executive director of Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. In his capacity, he co-chairs the GBV Committee of the National Gender Sector Working Group and hosts the East African Civil Society Organization Forum, Kenyan chapter. He's the chair of the East African Community Kenya National Dialogue Committee and the member of the EAC Regional Dialogue Committee. Welcome, Mr. Masheti, to our program.
Exactly. Mr. Masheti, how are you feeling?
Thank you.
How are you feeling, being the only man in the house?
It's okay.
Okay, I'm very cautious about pronouncing your second name because of the region where I come from. So we'll just follow up with the conversation that we've been having in the previous segments. In many societies, we've seen women play subordinate to men, which makes them vulnerable to violence from all levels of society. So my question is, what role can men play to do away with gender relations that disempower women as we fight against sexual and gender-based violence?
I think one of the first things to do would be to look for forums where they can be much more vocal in advocacy against gender-based violence. It may also help if they could inform themselves much more on what are the issues. I'm raising this because some of the gender-based violence is actually cultural and it is tolerated. So the high toleration for it makes it look normal, and the normalization rate leads to intensification of sexual and gender-based violence. Yeah, men could also participate much more in setting up institutions and also supporting institutions that focus on different forms of addressing gender-based violence, such as psychological support, particularly to men, including perpetrators of violence, but also support for male survivors or victims of violence. I'm at this stage, for instance, thinking about small boys who are normally sodomized and they suffer sexual violence and often also physical violence. This is a category of survivors of violence that is not very well addressed because of inaction on part of the men to see it as a problem affecting them and putting in place measures that can be able to be helpful towards addressing the situation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Masheti. Again, just making close reference to the statistics that were read out a while back, and we saw a case of Bomet where what was recorded was purely sexual violence. Now, is this where now the sexual consent plays about, and how does it work in marriage, especially in patriarchal society where the man who paid dowry believes marriage is an institution, marriage as an institution gives them the consent to do whatever they please as long as it is with their partner. And we very well know that this is what more often than not leads to rape. It also leads to battery. So what happens when the partner declines, the sexual advances? How does the sexual consent work in this kind of unions?
It's not clear. As you introduced it, marriage norms are cultural.
Yes.
And the understanding from a cultural point of view is that there is consent that has been given just by accepting the marital relationship. So this is one area where probably men need much more education and also stern action on law enforcement, particularly when it comes to judicial processes, for it to be clear that there isn't an open kind of invitation to consent within marriage, that even within marriage, a man may still need to seek consent. the general understanding currently is that this can't happen in marriage, and you find some even prominent church leaders who are supposed to be having a good understanding of the law still arguing that rape, for instance, cannot happen within a marriage. So it's on one part a question of education, but also on the other part, if there was much more focus in terms of the cases that are coming in court and rulings made, making it clear that rape can happen in marriage, then many more men would be conscientized and they could be able to understand that rape can happen in marriage. As it is, hardly anybody is punished for that, and therefore the impunity continues.
At your organization, which is the Collaborative Center for Gender and Development, I know you do a lot of policies and researches. What are some of the works that you're doing in the fight against SGBV?
The biggest program in the fight against SGBV is at the policy level, where we collaborate and partner with key government ministries, like the State Department for Gender, the National Gender and Equality Commission, to ensure that the policies and laws already in place are implemented. We also partner with them to assist where it matters in terms of clarifying how the policies should be able to work, and also have secondary partnerships with organizations within the counties, particularly at the community level, in simplifying some of the processes in getting these policies kind of understood first and then implemented later. There is generally a big problem in adopting most of the policies into manageable or implementable kind of initiatives at the community level. One of the problems has to do with financing, which we also assist in terms of sourcing for finances. But the other one just has to do with having simple kind of guidelines on how to conduct some of the things. With respect to sexual and gender-based violence, it's an area where there has been less government investments because they're not really, if you like, hardware kind of investments. So the software elements that are needed, for instance, in awareness raising, in community organization, in using different kinds of mechanisms that exist at the community and county levels to address, are not very well understood. So it's also one of those areas that we work with government, we work with a similar kind of civil society organizations and other non-state actors to assist in the implementation of policies and laws. For the policies and laws that don't exist, we also focus on identifying gaps towards within existing laws and within existing policies, and seeking reviews within the normal government processes to be able to address those gaps so that these laws can be implemented better in initiatives that are going to be adopted within counties and at the community level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've just been informed that Education CS George Magoha has announced that the schools will be reopening next year. Next year in January. CS George Magoha has just made an announcement that schools will be reopened in January next year. We are looking at Dr. Susan Gitao, who is supposed to be joining us. I don't know if she's with us already. She's a counseling foundation, SGCF. We are waiting for her to tell us some of the, emotional issues that are, increasing these cases of gender-based violence, especially during the pandemic. Angelina indeed told us that some of the economic violence is because people are not able to provide for their families. And she mentioned that, Angelina, you mentioned that this kind of violence doesn't have to be physical. Maybe if you can expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, when you say violence, it doesn't have to be physical. It also includes absence of economic resources. There are those who, because of the difficult times, they're no longer speaking to each other, husband and wife. You're living in the same household and you are living with someone whom you don't speak to. So if you want a cup that is next to them, you're not speaking to one another, you keep brushing each other within the household, that has a toll on your mental status. You have needs that are very basic. For example, as women and girls would require things like sanitary towels every other month. You cannot speak to your spouse to ask for support because you don't have money to be able to purchase the pads. Then you're asking him for support and he's not speaking to you. The children are coming to parents and asking for support and saying, Daddy, I need this. Mommy, I need this. Mommy doesn't have the money. Daddy does not have the money. So how are you communicating to your children? Instead of being able to humbly explain the situation to them, and then together as a family think of alternatives, parents are resorting to beating up the children and saying they're being spoiled. They're asking too much. Don't they know that there is COVID? They do not understand. So you're seeing families struggling to communicate the information clearly within themselves as couples. We are also seeing families having problems in learning how to communicate to their children. We are also seeing spouses who are you're spending more time with your spouse than you used to before. There's nowhere to run to, there's no bar to go to, there's no work to go to. You have to speak to your partner. Now, if it's something that you've not cultivated, then you're struggling and asking, so what are we doing in this house? So we're seeing that as also having a toll. And so instead of communicating to each other, then your people are opting to making derogative statements. People are choosing to go to social media to talk about their issues rather than speaking to one another. So there is that bit that's taking a toll on people on mental wellness. And guys, people who have challenges in terms of their just mental status, then are struggling with issues like depression. If there's no one around, for those who live alone, probably during the curfew, your spouse was many miles away from you, another county. So what do you do that time? So people are struggling to just manage their time being by themselves and within the spaces that have been availed because of the COVID measures. So that has a toll. So psychological wellness is something that we need to truly address during this time.
Absolutely. We will hope that Dr. Susan will be talking more about that. Angelina, I have one more question for you. From women don't seem to know their rights. You know, someone is stuck at home with an abusive partner, and because she has nowhere to go, she does not know that if she chooses to divorce this person, that there are rights, there's the law that can take care of her. Kindly tell us some of the rights that women need to know about so that they can make these decisions that will empower them and make them move away from that abusive relationship or the abusive household.
Well, there are many rights, and as Jane earlier put it out, Kenya has been lucky enough to have very progressive laws, especially in terms of addressing issues of violence within the household. So one of the things that women need to know is the fact that, one, marriage is a choice. You can choose to stay with the person you have, and you can also make a choice not to stay with that person. The challenge is being able to accept that against our cultural backgrounds and acknowledge that indeed marriage is not for everyone, and not every marriage is happy. There are challenges, and if you cannot be able to address them, or if there are no mechanisms that you feel adequately safe, then stepping aside is also an option. The law also provides for things like, we have the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, that allows for you to go and seek for separation. You can also get what you call a restraining order, whereby your spouse can be told to stay away, at least about 100 kilometers away from you, because it appears that every time you're close to each other, then the next thing would be bouts of violence. So those are options that you have. You can also stay away and also organize through parental agreements in terms of the care and support for the children. Most of the time women say, I have to stay because of the children, but the law also protects you, even protects those children, such that we can all stay separately, respecting each other, caring for our children, without the requirement that we be in the same space, yet we are not able to respect one another. Of course, the other bit that the law also provides is the fact that you can always access the information. One of the things that we Kenyans are not very fond of is reading what the laws say. We are very fast in saying, let's pass the law, but do we really understand them? It's important that we get a chance to look at what our laws provide. What does the law say in terms of protection? Children have rights, and where are the other institutions that you can seek support from? We have the Children's Office that takes care of the welfare of the children. We have the State Department of Gender that can give us guidance and policy frameworks that help us to be able to address some of the salient issues. There you have the FGM Act that's supposed to protect not just the child who is being affected adversely with FGM, but also a law that has punishment for those who support the act, from those, the circumcisers, those who witness the act happening and do nothing about, to those who are making this equipment. So that is actually available in the law, and it's important that as men and women of society today, we familiarize ourselves and also find ways and means within which we can be supported where we have challenges. But the big one is what Jane said, being able to speak out. Speak out and you'll be supported. Reach out and you'll be assisted. The police even have a hotline which they've launched on cases of violence. And it's important that where you feel now the person is completely out of bound, then you allow the law to take its course. Let's not protect perpetrators. Let us allow them to be rehabilitated in our facilities, which is our prisons. Prison is not punishment. Prison is rehabilitation, so that those who have challenges can go somewhere to learn how to address some of the issues that they have and do it in a respectful manner so that we save lives rather than violate one another. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Angelina, for your wonderful sentiments. Now, moving away from the home environment, I want to go back to one of our panelists, who is the Director for Africa for WIN. I want us to move to the work front, because the reality is that men and women also experience SGBV at their place of work. So, Jane, what is the nature and type of sexual and gender-based violence that employees are exposed to on the work front? And what are some of the telltale signs that probably human resource or even colleagues can pick out when one of their own is undergoing or experiencing sexual and gender-based violence, and what mechanisms should employers put in place to offer support for such people?
Queenter, at the work front, the biggest form of violence that people face is sexual harassment. And sexual harassment then remains the biggest elephant in the room in many workplaces, because many employers and managers do not want to recognize that it is something that is happening within the work environment. And when sexual harassment takes place, which is an action that is of sexual nature and it is unwanted, it is not welcome, it is intimidating, it is threatening the person to whom it is intended for, then you find that this person will not be the same as to the time when they were employed. You will find an employee who is a victim of sexual harassment will start withdrawing. If they were very sharp in terms of contributing to ideas and completing their work and interacting with colleagues, they start becoming, they just withdraw and they are just by themselves. They don't want to join their colleagues, they no longer contribute ideas, and you may even notice that when they see the perpetrator, the person who perpetrates that sexual violence or sexual harassment towards them, they sort of shrink, and it's like they want to hide, or they don't want to sit near that person, or you see like there's some fear. You can even see maybe with their eyes or with their body language that they are not free to interact with that person. So these sort of symptoms need to be addressed, because people even commit suicide because of the violence that they face. And in the workplace, other than the sexual harassment, there could even be the emotional violence that Angeline talked about earlier, where you find a boss telling you that you don't know anything, that you are not intelligent. Somebody can even say, let me say it in Kiswahili, wewe ni mjinga tu, you know, there's nothing that you know. And these forms of emotional violence that affect somebody psychologically, and then this person is not able to perform. And you know, when performance is affected in the workplace, then it is not going to work very well. So what is important is that employers must develop mechanisms in which to address sexual and gender-based violence in the workplace. One, for me, I always insist, every organization must have a gender policy, that we look at issues like discrimination, that we look at other forms in which somebody could be affected, and most importantly, an organization must at all costs have a sexual harassment policy. A sexual harassment policy will then be able to address cases of sexual harassment when they happen, but most importantly, it will be a way of preventing sexual harassment from happening, because then that particular organization will make itself zero tolerant, and it will proclaim, the organization must proclaim that it is zero tolerant to sexual harassment, and all employees must sign to the fact that they are not going to perpetrate or to tolerate sexual harassment in any form. And when this happens, it must also include clients and any other associates that are coming to this organization. They must know that anybody who is dealing with this organization is not in any way allowed to perpetuate sexual harassment or any form of sexual violence.
Moving away from the workplace and maybe just how the media reports the cases of gender-based violence. Someone here has texted me saying the role of the media and how it reports on violence. They say that the media is insensitive to the victims. We sensationalize the stories. They think that the language the media uses highly influences how society views the gender-based violence. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, when we come to discussing sexual and gender-based violence, people want us to sugarcoat it so that we don't tell it as it is. And the minute you sugarcoat it, then it is not going to be what has happened. And I think the role of the media is to inform and is to educate. So when the media informs that a form of sexual and gender-based violence happened somewhere, the media will tell it as it is. And you don't sensationalize violence when you say, this father defiled the daughter, or this man raped the husband, or this woman defiled the son, or this uncle sodomized the nephew. You tell it as it is. The minute you start sugarcoating cases of sexual and gender-based violence, then you are actually protecting the perpetrators of that particular, of the violence that is happening. And when we start having a conversation around it, like when the president spoke yesterday, and he must have been touched to feel that this is something that is a national issue and it needs to be addressed. And if you look at the statistics that Angeline was talking about, maybe every 1 minute there is a woman somewhere being defiled, there is a girl being defiled, there is a woman being raped, there is a woman being beaten. And even as at the time that we've spent here now talking about this topic, if you look at the statistics, how many have faced physical violence? How many have faced sexual violence? How many have faced economic violence? So it's really important that we speak about it. It's important that we say it as it is. And like I've said earlier, we must break the silence. What usually happens is that in communities, people want us not to talk. A girl is defiled by the father, and the mother is hushing it. The community is hushing it, and they are saying, no, this one now, because it's our blood. Let us protect our blood. And the minute you start saying, let us protect our blood, then this man is going to defile all the children that are under his care beyond his own. He will even go to the nieces and others. So breaking the silence on sexual and gender-based violence is important, and the media has a very, very big role in terms of highlighting these cases. When the media highlights these cases, then we know that they are happening. And the fact that this conversation is now taking place in media, it is no longer trivialized, because the media because the media now understands the importance of highlighting these cases. So I think the media is playing its role, and it needs to create awareness in communities, including not only in national and mainstream media like KTN, but we need to draw this including at the vernacular media stations,
Yes.
and ensure that the message of preventing sexual and gender-based violence from happening takes place.
Thank you very much, Jane. We are taking now a short break, but before we go there, just to the breaking news, remember Education CS George Makoha has announced that schools will reopen next year in January. This means, I think, that there is no KCP and no KCSE this year.
Yeah, I know. I have a candidate.
I also have a candidate. I don't know what to make of that. We're going to wait for the bulletin at 1 o'clock. I keep it KTN News. Maybe, Queen, you can tell us about the Twitter poll question.
Yes, before we go for the break, let me just remind you of our Twitter poll. We asked you a question: what are the main factors hindering the fight against sexual and gender-based violence? What are the main factors hindering the fight against sexual and gender-based violence? Be sure to take part in this important conversation by posting your questions, comments, and experiences on our social media handles at KTN News Kenya, at Queenie Saina, at Najma, which is NAJMMER, and Standard Group Women Network. And remember to use our hashtags for the day. Hashtag SGBV Silent Pandemic, hashtag gender-based violence, and hashtag #standards. Do not go away.
This is KTN News.
Knowledge is the most powerful tool in your shed, and with Farm Kenya Top Tips, we're putting the power in your hands. Get daily tips on farming, marketing, event alerts, weather updates, pest and disease alerts, and a whole lot more on your phone by sending FARM to 22840. For just 6 shillings daily, you get to stay ahead of the pack with the right data and information, shooting your venture into success. To unsubscribe, text FARM OFF to 22840. Go from just agribusiness to tip-top successful venture with Farm Kenya Top Tips. Farm Kenya, working to secure your growth.
Kuimarisha Kenya ni jukumu la Farm Kenya.
When the going gets tough, it's time to rally together to uplift the less fortunate. During this time, we can only face and fight COVID-19 by standing together. Together, we have a part to play, and with the Standard Group, we can support our fellow brothers and sisters. We are reaching out to communities facing challenges of sanitation, health, and nutrition through our media platforms to identify and provide assistance where it is most needed. From donation of masks and other protective gear, soap, sanitizers, and water to dry food and other critical supplies, we are asking you, the caring organization and individual, to rally behind us as we seek to help our fellow brothers and sisters through this crisis. Even in the most difficult of times, Kenyans have found hope in each other. We can overcome COVID-19 if we stand together. For more information on how you can be a part of this initiative, contact us on SMS 40616 or send an email to standwithkenya@standardmedia.co.ke. Stand with Kenya for the love of humanity.
Serikali yaweza tu ikueleze hatari ambayo iko mbele yako, lakini hawawezi kuwa kwa nyumba yako, hawawezi kuwa katika kila kanisa, hawawezi wawe katika kila msikiti, hawawezi wakuwe katika kila soko. Ni wewe.
This is KTN News.
You're watching KTN News. This is a special forum, Has Standards by the Standard Group Women Network, where we are talking about gender-based violence. My name is Najma Ismael, in case you've just joined us, and my co-host?
My name is Queenter, Mbori.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
So President Uhuru Kenyatta directed the National Crime Research Center to move with speed and commence investigations on increasing cases of gender-based violence and teenage pregnancies in the country. This is at a time when different reports indicate a surge in the number of teen pregnancies, with schools remaining closed over coronavirus.
I am indeed concerned by the increased tensions within our homes. Cases of gender-based violence have increased, mental health issues worsened, and instances of teenage pregnancy have also escalated. I appeal to all our social institutions, including our religious institutions, to exercise civic responsibility to bring these unfortunate trends to an end. We must always remember that the family is a projection of the state. If the family is under attack, the state is under attack. If the family is weak, a nation is weak.
Well, that there was President Uhuru Kenyatta making the 9th presidential address on COVID-19 pandemic. And his sentiments come in closely and echoes those of several local and international organizations, international human rights organizations, on the rising cases of gender-based violence cases in the country. So we're going to go to our panelist, who is Masheti Masinjilia. And Mr. Masheti, what we want to know from you is, what are your thoughts on that address? And what do you think is the reason behind the surge in these cases of sexual and gender-based violence in the country?
Thank you. I think from where I stand, the address by the President is a game changer in particularly these COVID times, but it also sets the pace in terms of government commitment at the highest level, and giving a much more serious direction to the government attending to issues of sexual and gender-based violence. For instance, the directive on research being conducted by the Crime Research Center is a very important one, because it shows that there is going to be an evidence-based approach towards government response, and this should be able to percolate in all the areas of law enforcement and education and other kind of important sectors within government, in addressing collectively and in a very wholesome manner issues of sexual and gender-based violence. Yesterday, we had the weekly meeting of the Gender-Based Violence Subsector Committee under the auspices of the State Department for Gender. And the committee expressed their confidence that now that the President has addressed this specifically and given also specific directives to law enforcement, earlier on he had also talked about the role of community level agents like chiefs and other administrative officials in, if you like, focusing much more specifically on tracing people involved in sexual and gender-based violence crimes and bringing them to book. So this kind of commitment, both from law enforcement but also from government administration, is very welcome, and we are looking forward to a much more concerted approach from government and from all the other actors that will be energized by the very clear statement that the President gave. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Masheti. Very wonderful thoughts. I think I'm going to go back to Angelina, because just before we started the show, we were having a very interesting conversation, and she had her views on the presidential address. So, Angelina, domestic violence, judging by what the President was talking about yesterday, lest we forget, the domestic violence existed even before the COVID-19. So looking at the 30-day call, the president gave a 30-day call for action against SGBVB perpetrators. Is that realistic, or has this action been overtaken by time? Angeline?
Well, it's about time that the president stepped in and made his views known. So it's very timely for him to be able to speak out, and especially now with COVID-19. Simply because, one, we've realized that with COVID, the situation has been exacerbated even further, meaning it's even higher than what we had before COVID happened. One of the things that we are very keen on is the fact that, one, violence is around power. It's about power. It's about how you choose your power and how you use it. So for us, what the president is asking is that, can we all use our power and use it properly? Can we stop taking advantage of those we perceive to be weaker? And rather than look for ways of demeaning or violating them, why don't we use that space to build each other up? Why don't we use that space to see what are the changes we need to adopt together, especially during the COVID period, to support one another? Right now, as you rightfully put, the Ministry for Education has said that schools are not opening until January. So what are we doing with our children? How are families managing to keep themselves healthy, to protect their children, and that violence is not one of those things that they need to worry around. If you know you have people who have issues, mental issues that need to be addressed, can you be able to seek support from those that are able to provide that? If you've got violators in the communities, can you speak out and let us be able to make sure that the authorities are able to step in and take action? Because once the fabric of society, which is the family, is destroyed in the name of violence, then we no longer have a community. We no longer have a society. Strong societies stand on very strong values. We have very good values within our constitution. It's time that we now demonstrate it by living those values, and not just as parents, but as parents and as children, as communities, where we all step in and build these values moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're now joined by Dr. Susan Gitau on phone. You're expecting to have her on Zoom. Maybe you can just give us her profile, just to remind people who she is.
Yes, Dr. Susan Gitau is a counseling psychologist. She's a certified counselor. She's also an expert at training of trainers. She's an accredited counselor supervisor with Kenya Counselors and Psychological Association, KCPA. She is also a member of East African Standby Force. And of course, she's a lecturer at African Nazarene University. Welcome, Dr. Susan. How are you? Dr. Susan, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, fantastic. Welcome to the program. Now, I have a question from someone on Twitter, Ambassa41613228. He says, this is Ambassador John from Langata, Nairobi. The main factor is the lack of trust and communication among couples. I think he's talking about the main factor that is, fueling the gender-based violence at the moment right now is the lack of communication and trust among couples. What are your thoughts on that, Dr.
Well, he is right, because when couples do not communicate effectively, they are bound to fight. Mm-hmm. The children also, if there is no effective communication between parents and children, because we have also seen cases of abuse against children, people end up into conflict. But I would also say that causes of gender-based violence, as I back up my panelists, if I go from the mental health perspective, you realize there's a lot of social role models. What have we seen since time immemorial? Traditionally, in the African context, you find that beating a wife is not a big deal. Impregnating a girl and reporting to the chief and no action is taken, or reporting this to wazés or community elders, there are those kangaroo courts. There is a lot of mental structure or script that is written about how a woman is looked at or a girl is looked at, as opposed to the way you look at a boy or you look at a man. However, we are seeing cases of sexual gender-based violence also meted against men. So it is because probably the girl child or the woman has fought so hard to an extent right now, there is like equal empowerment. But if I want to go down to what is happening right now with COVID-19, I would like to validate the role that distress or stress or trauma or even depression has played in escalating cases of SGBV. So we do have situations whereby people have personality differences. And if this was not handled during the premarital sessions, when they get married and now there are forced circumstances to stay under one roof within limited time, you will find some people who had unfinished businesses now erupting. And I would also say that, like my predecessors have said, the current situation, there are many, many stressors. So if we also have people who have very limited resilience, or what I would call resilience deficit, they do not know how to withstand stress. They also don't have life skills in terms of conflict resolution skills, problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, creative thinking skills. You will find all these SGBV cases going up. But I would also want to say that we do have a community that is dying in terms of thinking about one another. Lift me up, I lift you up. Think about me, I think about you. We are having a community, and that is not who we are as Africans, that is slowly becoming individuated. So I don't care what happens to my neighbor. I don't care what happens to my colleague. I don't care what happens to my neighbor's child. So we are getting to a level that we are not ready for, that people are so individuated, not thinking about one another, without really blaming the legal structures. I would say probably we have very beautiful legal instruments, but the implementation has always been our downfall. And this is where I think we need to be focusing our energies on. How do we ensure that the family structure that the president said, if the family is destroyed, a nation is destroyed. If you destroy a child, you have destroyed a nation's future. What we need to do, and I guess if we are talking about what we need to do, and then we are asking who are the players in this, then we would actually be talking something that is viable and something that can bring light, especially to everybody who is a victim of sexual and gender-based violence.
Thank you, Dr. My name is Queenter Mbori Saina, and I just wanted to bring to light that during this period of COVID-19 pandemic, most of the victims are actually trapped or locked up with their potential abusers. We are talking about, and more often than not, these are close relatives, guardians, people who live with the victims. Now, and these are the same people who abuse or defile, victims. I'm just wondering how then it becomes very difficult for them to even open up and speak about the vice. How do they open up, and how do we fight this vice, especially when you are abused by somebody who is very close to you?
To begin with, I want to hail the media for highlighting the plight of victims of SGBV. I would encourage that we continue raising the voice louder than we have done. And this should also go to the community level. Like, how many of us are listening to us? How many of us are watching us? So you will realize that until we go to the grassroots, get that assistant chief, make sure the assistant chief is working hand in hand with the administration police, because they are always together in one post. Let us have the community elders held accountable. And if we have never thought seriously about Nyumba Kumi projects or initiatives, this is the time where we can empower people at community level to raise a voice. I would also like to hail those people who have come out, because we need to have more and more people not shying off by not talking about what has happened to them. We need very many witnesses. We want men bold enough to come and say, this is what I've been going through in my house. We want women to come out and say so. We need those girls who have been impregnated violently to come out and say, this is what happened. And I have always told you these people are there because I work with them. I would like to hail those people, and I would like to say more people come out. More people come out. Let us shame this vice of silence. Why should we keep silent and our nation is dying? Why should we keep silent and people are hurting? So I would like to say that person, the savior is your voice first and foremost. Can you raise that voice? Can you say, hey, here someone is doing this and this to me? Whether it's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, can you raise a voice? Intellectual abuse, can we raise voices? Because when I have heard about the research that is being advocated, my prayer is that it is done as soon as it can, and people go to mashinani. When I talk about mashinani, grassroots level, can we go there? And you will actually find things that are going to shock you. Actually, what we are even talking about to me is still talking on the surface level. If you go down to the slum, if you go down to the rural areas, if you go down to those remote places, you will be shocked. We are talking about FGM, that is one way. But there are so many ways that women are shut up, men are also being shut up, and I want to say you will be shocked to find the difference between the men in the urban and the men in the remote or rural areas. You will also be shocked to see the things that happen in the slums or in form of settlements. So if we can raise the voice higher, and I'm very happy because the president has taken the lead. And I want to say, if you kill a woman, if you kill a girl child, you have also killed the nation. I think this should also go to another level. I would also like to say that the relatives of the people who are abused, and they know it, and you keep quiet, do you know you have killed that person forever? So they need to be told the impact, not only psychological, but even social.
Dr. Susan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
My apologies, Dr. Susan. We are running out of time. We just want to give some of our panelists, parting shot to tell us something really quickly. We have like 30 seconds, I think. Who are we going to take?
Where did time go?
Okay, I'll give it to you, Queen. I'll give it to you. So winding up, thank you very much for watching KTN News. It has been a special forum by her standards, the Standard Group Women Network, where we're talking about gender-based violence, and we choose to speak. We will keep speaking.
Exactly. Yes, remember the conversation will still go on social media platforms. Sexual and gender-based violence, this is not the end of it. Let's continue talking about it. Let's continue speaking up. And remember to stay safe and don't let your guard down. Till next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.